Well, thankfulness and thanksgiving and gratefulness is kind of the focus today. You know, in April, showers bring May flowers. You've heard that, right? Mm-hmm. What do May flowers bring? May flowers? Pilgrims. Yeah, pilgrims. That's right. You knew that one. That's good news. There's another sort of having to do with thankfulness, a little story I stumbled on. I thought might be a good little lead-in. I was a guy who was trying to find a parking space at a baseball game, and it was already into the first inning. He was getting a little desperate, so he resorted to prayer. He prayed to God, "Please, God, you've got to give me a parking space. Find a parking space for me, and I promise I'll never miss church again." Well, immediately a parking space appeared right before him, and he pulled it, and he said, "Never mind, God, I found one." That's a good one. I kind of do that a little bit sometimes. My mother I grew up on, my mother was always thanking God for parking spaces. It was constant. If she got a parking space anywhere, she'd say, "Oh, thank you, God." And I really thought of God as the provider of parking spaces growing up. That was one of his key jobs. Providing parking for Betty Malone. Gratefulness, thankfulness, we don't always feel it, but it's such a powerful spiritual practice. And we don't always think about it in that manner, I think. We make this very common misassumption about it, that we are grateful for reasons, that we're not grateful until we have a reason to be grateful. And we'll be happy if something happens to us, we'll be grateful, and that'll bring happiness. But actually, gratefulness itself, the practice of gratefulness, always precedes happiness. Gratefulness precedes happiness. It's the practice of gratitude that makes us happier and happier. And it's something we kind of, I know for myself, need to be reminded of often. There's a certain mindset that kind of comes with the human package, that we get into a sense of entitlement, and we get very focused on what's wrong and what needs to be fixed and what we don't have, that takes us away from the ability to feel grateful for things great and small, for little things. And the more we practice that, the more grateful we become, the more aware of blessings, and the more blessings seem to flow. And I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir with many of you. How many of you had a gratitude practice of some kind? Perfectly. And a lot of us. And how many of us do it all the time? Good job. So one hand in the back. It's easy to get away from. Would you agree? Yeah. It's easy to get away from. And so I think this is a good time of year to kind of remember how powerful gratitude is as a practice, and that we can do it anytime, anywhere, any circumstances, no matter what we're dealing with. My favorite guru on this is Brother David Stendal Rast. I don't know whether you've ever read any of his work. He's got a number of books out. He's a Benedictine monk. He's probably 80 now, at least. From Ithaca, New York, I think, is where he dwells. He has a website called gratefulness.org. If you're ever having a kind of a down day, go there. It's just a rich resource of stories that'll make you grateful. Stories about gratitude in other people's lives. And he's really tracked, times of really difficult times in the country, their load goes way up. People go into that website for comfort and encouragement and hope. It's a wonderful resource. And he's got lots of wonderful books. My favorite is Gratefulness, the Heart of Prayer. But his background was he grew up in Austria, World War II. And he was forced into the German army, I think at about 19 years old. But as a young teenager, there was daily taking shelter in air raids, for air raids, going into shelters and bombing and coming out to devastation. But he remembers so keenly in that era, he would come out and he would see some untouched grass that was still green and radiant in the sun. And he'd see the sun coming down, pouring down in exquisite manner, and everything looked so radiant. He was alive. And he remembered that time, and it stuck with him forever. And it fueled all his work on gratefulness later. He remembered that time as a time of great happiness. And it was because of that experience of gratefulness for the littlest of blessings. And this understanding that dawned on him that everything in life is a gift. Life itself is a gift. Everything is gratuitous, as he calls it. We don't tend to perceive it that way. We have a sense of entitlement. Everything should be as we need it to be. But in fact, it's all a gift. It's absolutely all a gift. And when you begin to come from that perspective, and you begin to experience the rich blessings of that in the everyday, you become happier and happier. It's automatic. And that's much of what he teaches in his books and in his speaking. Jesus taught this as a practice, and he demonstrated it in his healing teaching ministry consistently. He said thank you in everything, usually before there was anything to give thanks for. He gave thanks before the healing of Lazarus. He said, thank you, God, for hearing me. I know that you hear me always. He said, thank you before feeding the crowds with insufficient supplies. He said, thank you. He demonstrated it constantly, that an experience of gratefulness, which is really an awareness of God's great blessings, God's grace with us. The more we have that, the more blessings abound, miraculously, supernaturally, the way blessings will appear and increase in our lives. I think we have an experience of this, and we know that gratitude makes for happiness, that gratitude always precedes happiness, that it's really a powerful prescription for happiness if we're in need of it. I think we know it. Looking back, our retrospective vision is often so much better, isn't it? I have really good retrospective vision. In the moment, it's often not quite so good. But we know it's true that those who are most grateful are most content. Would you agree? Mm-hmm. Those who are most grateful are most content. Those of us among us who are able to perceive blessings every day in little ways, they just seem to be happier. They're just, they're more peaceful, they're more content with their lives, because they're feeling more blessed day by day. Gratefulness precedes happiness. We've all had experiences of it looking back. I can remember countless times where I got a jump start on gratefulness from an experience that triggered it more deeply. I remember having a really bad flu. Really only one time in my life I ever had a flu. I had a really bad flu. It's probably a good decade ago or longer. The kind where you just can't even get up out of a chair. It seems to take incredible energy. I was probably 20, it was before we were married, so it was more than 20 years ago. It was a long time ago. But anyway, very, very ill, and difficulty breathing, no energy. You just had to wait it out, that kind of a flu bug. And on the first day, I started feeling better, that I could breathe again, that I didn't have aches and pains everywhere, that I had energy to get up and get something to eat, and life was good. Life was so good. Do you know that feeling of tremendous gratefulness for health that comes back? Something you've been taking for granted day by day, day after day after day, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, what a blessing it is to be healthy again. What a rich blessing. We need to kind of be reminded somehow, and that's one of the things that happens when we have some misfortunes or a little ill health or something like that. We remember it's all a gift. Life is a gift. And good health is a great gift that we take for granted. So many things are tremendous gifts we take for granted. So, prescription for happiness then, for greater happiness and contentment and peace of mind and heart, is cultivate a grateful heart. Cultivate a grateful heart, and it's something we can all do. It's doable for every one of us. No matter what our circumstances, no matter where we find ourselves or what we're dealing with, there's always a reason to be grateful. We may not see it that way, but there always is. Brother David makes a strong point that all perception is selective. And I think this is a good thing to bear in mind. You know, when we're feeling like there's just nothing to be grateful for, I don't see anything to be grateful, he says, well, that's really an unrealistic perception. All perception is selective. We select how we're going to perceive things. And if we perceive everything as negative and lacking and wrong, we're mistaken. our perception is off. We are selecting a negative set of things we're looking at. We can change our selection. We can change our perception. And it really becomes, he said, a perspective of gratefulness is a realistic attitude toward the world. I love that, because we don't tend to think that. A perspective of gratefulness is really a realistic attitude toward the world. It's a move toward seeing the world as it really is. Yeah, there's some negativity, but there's also rich blessings. It's a more balanced view of what a reality is like. So the prescription for happiness, cultivate a grateful heart. How do we do that? Every way we can, I guess. Every idea that comes to us, as often as we can, in tiny ways and medium-sized ways and big ways, every way we can. And there's all kinds of practices you can do. If we went around the room, we'd probably have a lot of ideas shared, because a lot of us have done this kind of practice. Brother David's perennial practice, I think he's done it always, is to think of a new thing to be grateful for every day. I think he does it first thing in the morning. A new thing to be grateful for every day. And over time, you'll come up with quite a list of tiny things. The sensation of breath coming in through your nostrils, the coolness of the water out of your tap, the very fact that you have running water coming out of your tap. Wow, amen to that is a blessing. The quality of light coming in the window each morning, how different that is, the different color of sunset every evening, the difference of different cloud formations in the sky, a dream you had, a card you got in the mail. I mean, it can be unlimited, really, as you begin to think of things. So Brother David has had that practice for years and years, and over-awareness that builds your, over the months and years, that builds your awareness of blessings tremendously. It's changing, it's life-changing, it's transformative. You can keep some kind of a gratitude journal or a gratitude calendar, which is a similar kind of thing. I've shared this before, I think. I kept a gratitude calendar for about a year and a half. I did it for quite a while. At a time in my life when I had a lot of problems, a lot of financial challenges. I wasn't making ends meet very well. I was living alone. I had a lot that was missing, it seemed like, or lacking in my life, and dealing with a fair amount of depressive thoughts at the time, a lot of depression. And I began to realize I just wasn't doing myself any good by dwelling on it. I was going to church and doing my prayer work and so on, but too often my prayer work was digging my heels in about how unhappy I was and the things I needed God to make happen for me before I could be happy, instead of awareness of what I had done for me, which is always more than we think. So this idea came to me to just start. I had a wall calendar with a little square, and every day, usually dinner time while I was putting dinner together or something, I'd step over there and write down a blessing of the day. Something I saw, something I witnessed, something I experienced, some kindness from somebody, in just a few words in that little box. And I did that every day, and the calendar got full of them as I went along, week after week. And I would often, as I would write things, look back at the ones from prior weeks, of course, so it was kind of a cumulative effect. And I began to be aware that it was really shifting my perception during the day, because as I was out and about or taking my morning walk, I would be kind of taking note. That's a good calendar moment. I'll put that on the calendar later. Oh, look at that new flower opening, a formation of geese going over, whatever it might be. I would think of that as something, I'll put that on the calendar later. How exquisite, it's something. You're training your perception as you take note of these things, right? That's how we train our perception to do a different selection, as Brother David says. And over time, over the weeks and months, flip the calendars, there's just nothing but blessings on there. Every little square, day after day, began to be really aware that I was feeling much better. I was much more grateful, much more aware of all the many blessings in my days and nights, happier, less depressed, more peaceful. it's something we can all do, no matter where we are. We can train our perception to take more note of blessings. They're all around us. They're with us always. Gratitude precedes happiness. It's something to reflect on deeply. There's a woman, a writer around, many of you may have read her book, Simple Abundance. Maybe you read Sarah Von Branick's book, Simple Abundance. I think it came out in the late 90s. She's done other books since then. There's a Simple Abundance journal. It's kind of a gratitude journal. There's quite a few books since then. She sold like 5 million copies in this country, a couple million abroad. And I was interested to read the story of where that book came from. Her personal bio was with a lot of rockiness in it, you know. She sounds like she was a bit of a spontaneous person. She went to Ireland and she fell in love with someone and got married, and then it was a big mistake. And then she couldn't get out of it very quickly because they didn't allow divorce in Ireland. I don't know whether that's still true, but at the time. So she came back to the States and eventually got a divorce and was struggling to make ends meet with like secretarial work and housekeeping, anything, while she was also trying to write, which was really what she wanted to do. But she wasn't at all happy with the writing she was doing, with how she was having to make ends meet. She said she was feeling envious, angry, and whining, I like this, on the inside. I like that, because I've done that. Anybody else whine on the inside? You know it's not appropriate to whine too much out here. But on the inside, it's like, I'm whining on the inside. She said one day she got sick of it. She got sick of that, and she said, one morning I was just sick of it. I sat down and I said, don't get up from this table until you write down 50 reasons to be grateful. It took me 6 hours and 3 pots of tea, she said, and I was really quite humbled. She said these could be anything from finding a parking space, there is again, parking space there, to cooking dinner while listening to opera. But these are the little things she came up with. She said, we think that the big things are the narrative of our life. The wedding, the big job, the promotion, and really those are punctuation marks. For me, the narrative is written in the small every day, the small and the inconsequential, which are really essential. She said, I was dumbfounded to discover this. And she began this practice of seeing the blessings in everyday life. And it improved her life dramatically. And she kept doing it over the months. She began a tithing practice, which is often a natural offshoot of, and you perceive your blessings and then you want to give back out of them. It's a spiritual principle that also kind of increases the flow of blessings in our lives. She started tithing 10% of her income, which at that time was still mostly from housekeeping. She was writing on the side, giving those gifts to charity, and doing her practice. And after a couple of 2-3 months, she started realizing, I'm onto something. This is the path to an abundant and happy life. And she called her agent and said, I think we have a book. And she did. And she did. I think that's a wonderful story. It's the same experience I had on this much, much smaller scale. I didn't come out with a bestseller, but I came out happier and more content. A gratefulness practice always precedes greater happiness. It's that's the right, it's not, the other way is cart before the horse, thinking that if we just get enough, or if God gives us what we think is lacking in our lives, or if we have, some good luck, then we'll be grateful, and then we'll be happier. But no, we start with gratefulness for where we are, what we have, day by day, moment by moment. And small and inconsequential, there really isn't anything inconsequential. If we perceive it as a blessing, we can let that perception lift us, uplift our hearts. I like that what Sarah Von Branick said about gratitude. She uses it with a capital G, gratitude. She talks about its mystical power. She said gratitude's most profound mysteries are revealed when we are struggling through personal turmoil and overcome with doubt. I love that. It's not in the good times, but the mystical power of gratitude really shows itself when we're in dire straits sometimes. We're in a tough place, feeling like there's not much to give thanks for. That's when it really shows its miraculous supernatural power, because if we get to practice it, focusing on blessings, the more blessings begin to emerge. It's amazing how it can happen. We don't make that happen. It's because this is a generous, God-guided universe, a God-infused universe, and we kind of prime the pump of God's graces when we give thanks. That's a good affirmation. I prime the pump of God's graces when I give thanks. Want to join me in that? I prime the pump of God's graces when I give thanks. It's a nice one. So to truly celebrate Thanksgiving this year, I think that's a wonderful way to do it, to consider taking up or renewing some kind of gratefulness practice every day, even if just for a moment, to jot something down, a blessing, to remember a blessing, to maybe do that on waking or before going to sleep at night. Also a real powerful time to plant a good, powerful seed in consciousness of, I'm grateful for this, I'm grateful for that, how blessed I am, and then take that into sleep. Powerful practice. Here's the affirmation I actually wrote for today. I am grateful for every blessing, and my blessings abound. Join me in that one. I am grateful for every blessing, and my blessings abound. Let's take that into prayer for a moment. Affirm that truth within. Every moment of Thanksgiving triggers more and more blessings in our lives. Every moment when we give thanks, we feel that great fullness that comes into our hearts, into our minds. So we practice that. We practice that generously and lavishly. And as we do, we experience God's graces more and more abundantly. Thank you, God, for your unfailing presence with us, now and always. Amen.